Around 2 a.m., the only illumination came from a handful of faint hallway lights. The rest of the place was shrouded in darkness. In my cramped 10x10 cell, I lay flat on my back, hands clasped behind my head, watching the shadows play on the walls and ceiling. Sleep evaded me as my mind wrestled with memories I desperately wanted to erase. Then, the sound of approaching footsteps reached my ears. I began counting. 7, 8, 9, 10. There he was, his face a rigid, impassive mask, just like all the others here. He was merely performing his duty, making his rounds, offering no acknowledgement or interaction. I couldn't tell if he registered my presence, but it didn't signify. He was on the outside, and I remained confined. As he passed my cell, I ceased counting. There was no point in keeping track. He wouldn't return for another hour and a half. My gaze shifted to the ceiling, my thoughts consumed with what I'd do upon release. 5 days remained. Then I'd be finished, for good. I'd completed 7 months of a 1-year sentence, and my job was waiting. Everything else, however, would be irrevocably altered. My older brother Luke had maintained my car, handled my bills, and monitored my dwindling bank account. Was I angry? Angry didn't even begin to describe it. But I'd learned to suppress those emotions, at least until I was free. It's clear why guys doing 10, 20 years walk out with vacant stares. Humanity is often the first casualty in this environment. This place was tame compared to the high-security facility upstate, but even here, you had to keep your head down to survive. I closed my eyes, yearning for a few hours of peaceful slumber, picturing the darkness of my old bedroom, the one with blackout shades. "I'll be picking you up next Tuesday," Luke had informed me last week in the visitor center. We spoke through a plexiglass partition, hopefully for the final time. "Anything special you want to eat on your first night out?" he'd asked, grinning. "A steak. Big one. Medium rare," I replied. He chuckled. "Anthony, you're easy. Thought you'd give me a real challenge for sneaking past Beth." Luke explained I'd be staying with him and his wife Beth until I got back on my feet. My house was practically empty of both food and furniture, so this would provide me with time to regroup. "It's not the Ritz, but it's clean and you can come and go as you please," he added with a smile. I didn't reciprocate. "Thanks," I began, but he cut me off. "Forget it. We're family. That's what family does." Luke understood its significance to me. "Don't worry about Mom and Dad," he continued. "They'll come around once things settle down." We both knew that was unlikely to happen anytime soon. "Seen my kids?" I'd inquired. 2 weekends ago at Mom and Dad's," he responded. "Nora looks about the same, but Jack's got one of those trendy bowl cuts. Awful. I told him so myself." Luke laughed, but the anecdote wasn't as lighthearted for me. "You know what?" he said. "He told me I wasn't his dad, so he didn't have to listen." I nearly smacked him, but Mom was there. "You're going to have your hands full with him." Jack wouldn't dare speak to me that way. My son and daughter would be staying with Sarah once I was released, but I wasn't eager to force the issue. The divorce was final, but I still owned half the house, and she owed me close to $65,000 to buy me out. She'd probably emptied the safety deposit box, taking the CDs and bonds, but I had a documented list with my lawyer to address that. Kathy, and that ex-friend of mine, Tom, had truly wronged me, but I wouldn't be caught off guard again. Lying there, I replayed the past, steeling myself for whatever lay ahead. As soon as I left this place, I would begin constructing a new life. This nightmare would become a thing of the past, and I would move forward, regardless of how long it took. Before I ended up here, life was good, or so I believed. A few weeks before everything imploded, a couple of friends had alluded to things I dismissed. They probably assumed I was aware, or didn't mind. It struck me now that no one wanted to interfere. We had 12 years together, 2 children, a decent house, and stable jobs. Sure, we had our disagreements, but I loved Sarah, and never envisioned she would betray me. We weren't the social butterflies of the neighborhood, just a small circle of couples we spent time with, Most married for over 7 years like us, all with kids. Tom and his wife, Brenda, didn't have children, though they'd been trying for years. Sarah likely knew the specifics, but I avoided prying into other people's lives. Brenda's drinking had escalated about a year ago. Initially, she was merely quiet and withdrawn, but things quickly deteriorated. Tom, who rarely drank, always ended up caring for her. "Tom, honey, get me another drink," she'd begin, only to conclude the evening by demanding drinks, with Tom practically carrying her home. It was a sad spectacle, but not my concern. "That was a mess with Brenda tonight," I'd grumbled to Sarah once as we prepared for bed. She passed out a couple of times, I think. Greg and Jenna probably left early because she was hitting on Greg, asking him to help her out of her clothes. Sarah just shook her head. She's distraught over not having children, but blaming Tom isn't going to resolve anything, I told her. They could adopt, but she refuses to consider it. She's convinced it's Tom's fault. They'll either fix it or call it quits, I'd said, already apprehensive about the next dinner with them. "I'll try talking to her this week," Sarah said with a glimmer of hope. "Maybe she'll tone it down for at least one night." But Brenda didn't tone it down. "Waiter, how's a girl supposed to get a drink around here?" she yelled, her words already slurred. She was starting in on Tom, and he was at his breaking point. So I intervened. "Come on, Brenda. You promised me a dance," I said, guiding her to the dance floor. She attempted to object, but I didn't give her the option. I danced with her through 3 songs while Sarah remained at the table to talk to Tom, who looked utterly drained. Near the hallway, Brenda mumbled something about needing the restroom and wandered off. After a few minutes, I debated what to do and asked 2 women entering the restroom to check on her. "Is she wearing a bright yellow dress?" one of them asked, peeking out. When I nodded, she shook her head. "She's passed out in a stall," she said. "If you want, I'll stand guard while you get her." I went in, propped Brenda up by the sink, and splashed cold water on her face. She roused momentarily, but then slumped again. Practically carrying her, I returned to the table where Tom looked both mortified and enraged. "Tom, let me help you get her to the car," I offered. "She's unconscious and won't be waking up anytime soon." As I supported a very intoxicated Brenda, Tom looked at me, embarrassed. "Anthony, I've got it. Sit down. It's not the first time, but it'll be the last," he muttered. Despite his protests, I carried her to the car while he retrieved her purse and mumbled a quick goodbye. I laid Brenda across the back seat, patted Tom's shoulder, and said, "I'm sorry, man." There wasn't much else to say. "Thanks for helping," he replied, sounding defeated. "I'm at the end of my rope. I don't know what to do. You 2 need some help?" "Counseling, maybe." "Sarah and I are here if you need us," I responded, though I knew his agreement was just polite. I doubted they'd last another 2 months. As it turned out, I wasn't far off, but nobody could have foreseen the outcome. 3 weeks later, just after 10:30 p.m. on a Thursday, we heard sirens and saw flashing lights at the end of our block. Sarah and I were both awake, and she started to go outside, but I stopped her. "Stay here, Sarah. I'll check it out." Joining the gathering crowd, I saw the fire department's rescue team forcing open the driver's side door of Tom's car. "Is Tom all right?" I asked a neighbor. "It's not Tom," she replied. "It's Brenda." They were arguing, and she grabbed his keys, ran out, and drove off. She didn't get far before rear-ending a parked car at about 40 miles per hour. The ambulance arrived, and paramedics placed Brenda on a stretcher, then drove off with Tom following. The front door of their house was wide open, lights still on, and furniture scattered. I called Sarah, updated her, then went over and locked up for Tom, leaving a note that I had his keys. "How's Brenda?" Sarah asked when I returned home. I shook my head. Not good. She wasn't wearing a seatbelt and swerved before impact. The airbag deployed, but she hit her head against the window hard enough to shatter it. She was going around 35 miles per hour. Tom's with her at the hospital. We'll wait to visit tomorrow. He's dealing with enough tonight. We went to bed, but sleep was fitful, worry gnawing at us. At 11 o'clock a.m. the next day, my phone rang, and Sarah's voice was frantic on the other end. "Anthony, Brenda's on life support. Tom's a wreck, and someone needs to be there. I'm leaving work. Meet me at the hospital." On my way, I picked up some food for us and called Sarah's parents to ask if they could collect our kids from school. In the hospital waiting room, Sarah and others were gathered around Tom, attempting to comfort him. "How is she?" I whispered to Sarah. She shook her head grimly. "Not good," she replied. "The doctor told Tom there's minimal brain activity, and he's been quiet since." I sat next to Tom. "Are you doing okay?" I asked, knowing it was a futile question. "She's not going to wake up, Anthony," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "The doctor asked if I'd consider taking her off life support, but how can I do that? She's my wife, not a machine to turn off." He was shouting now, grief and frustration pouring out. "Why can't they fix her? Isn't that what doctors are for?" Just then, Brenda's parents arrived and went into her room with Tom. There was a lot of crying, accusations, and anger. Her father blamed Tom for her condition, unable to see beyond his heartbreak. About 20 minutes later, the doctor emerged with Brenda's parents, who were devastated. They would never be able to speak to their daughter again. We left the hospital that evening, picked up the kids, and went home, both of us shaken. I kept thinking, I hope I never have to make that decision for Sarah or anyone I love. 2 days later, surrounded by Tom, Brenda's parents, and the doctor, they deactivated the life support machine, and Brenda passed away peacefully. We stayed to console Tom as best we could. Whatever her flaws, Brenda had been loved, and now she was gone. At her funeral, people spoke only of the fond memories. Tom took it hard, withdrawing from everything. He took a month off to go back east, and I assured him I'd look after things while he was away. One night, while we were getting ready for bed, I hugged Sarah and said, "You know I love you, right?" The past few weeks had taken their toll on both of us, and the tragedy was still raw. If I ever end up like Brenda, just let me go. I wouldn't want to be kept alive by machines. "Don't talk like that, Anthony," she said, shaking her head. That could never happen to us." A few weeks later, Tom returned. Sarah assisted him in sorting through Brenda's belongings, and after 3 months, he appeared to be on the mend. We included him in social gatherings and even tried to set him up on a few dates, although nothing truly materialized. Life began moving forward again, or so we thought. 6 months later, Tom finally seemed like his old self, laughing and engaging with us. It was heartening to witness him rediscovering joy, a small piece of peace after such a harrowing experience. Looking back, perhaps I overlooked certain cues. Sarah and I were still intimate, and things between us hadn't outwardly changed, yet there was a subtle shift. After a few months, I finally questioned her. "Is something bothering you?" "Nothing really, Anthony." "Why do you ask?" she replied, a little too casually. "You just seem a bit distant lately." "Everything's fine," she smiled. "Maybe you just haven't been getting enough attention. If you want more, just ask." She laughed and used a term I'd never heard from her before, lovemaking. I dismissed the strange feeling, kissed her, and attempted to put it out of my mind. But I'll never forget Friday, August 20th. That was the day my world imploded. Sarah called me at work, informing me the kids would be with her parents for the weekend, and inquired when I'd be home. "I'll make sure I'm back early," I told her, and she didn't request anything specific, simply asked me to let her know my arrival time. It was 3:30 p.m., about an hour and a half until I could leave, but my mind raced, envisioning a quiet weekend together. I drove home cautiously, mindful of the speed limit, yet still making it in a record 28 minutes. I should have sensed something amiss when I spotted 2 cars in the driveway, one of them Tom's. "Hey, honey, I'm home," I called out. Tom and Sarah were in the kitchen, and the atmosphere felt heavy. "Hey, Tom," I said slowly. "What's going on?" "Anthony, I need to talk to you." "Please have a seat," Sarah said, her voice trembling. I remained standing, arms crossed. I'd rather stand. Anthony, I wanted you to hear it from me before you receive the papers, she responded, sounding confused. What papers, Sarah? She took a hesitant step back. Divorce papers, she murmured. My heart sank as I struggled to comprehend. What are you talking about? Divorce papers? I glared at Tom. You should leave, Tom. This is between me and my wife. But then a realization struck me as I looked at her, then back at him. Tom, get out. Now. Anthony, this involves him too, she insisted. I clenched my fists, anger surging. Tom, if you don't leave now, you'll leave in a body bag, I threatened. He shot me a nervous glance before making for the door. Sarah, you and I need to talk. Now. There's nothing to talk about, Anthony, she replied. I'm in love with Tom. I'm sorry. My voice shook with fury. How long has this been going on? Even before Brenda passed, Tom interjected, his tone icy. You don't know anything, Anthony. Oh, I know enough. While I was consoling you, you were with my wife. I spat. Get out of my house, both of you. Anthony, it's my house too, Sarah argued. Not anymore. Get out, I shouted. She looked at me and finally said, Fine. I'll come back for my things when you've calmed down. You'll be dead by then, I muttered as they left. After they were gone, I lost control. A couple of beers and some broken furniture later, the house looked as shattered as I felt. I collected all of Sarah's belongings, tossed them onto the lawn, and turned the sprinklers on for 4 hours. Then I locked up, had a few more beers, and drank until I couldn't think. The next morning, her things were gone. I was still seething and didn't contact anyone, although I was certain the neighbors were aware by then. I called Sarah's mother to inquire about the children, but she was cold. Sarah already picked them up last night, Frank. Don't play games. She was here picking up her things. Now let me talk to my kids. She hung up on me, and when I called back, she didn't answer. Enraged, I canceled every credit card we shared and withdrew as much cash as possible from the bank. I made myself some coffee, ate, and formulated my plan for the day. Change the garage code, install new locks, and transfer anything of value to Luke's place. Just as I was about to leave, the doorbell rang. Peeking through the peephole, I saw a man holding a large envelope. He waited a few minutes, then departed. I called Luke and his wife, Beth, explained what had transpired, and asked them to keep it quiet. Then I went to Home Depot for new locks. On my way back, I spotted Tom's car in my driveway with Sarah loading items into it. My rage took over. Instead of driving past, I floored it, screeching into the driveway and ramming into the back of his car. He scrambled inside just as I hit his car, propelling it against the closed garage door. I reversed, backed up about 15 feet, and rammed it again, smashing his car through the door. Steam erupted from under my hood, and my engine groaned, but I managed to back up one last time, with only a few feet separating us, before my car stalled. Heart pounding, I grabbed an aluminum bat from the garage and began swinging, shattering the windows and windshield. I was about to rip open Tom's door when loud voices shouted from behind me, "Drop the bat and put your hands on your head." I complied, dropping the bat and kneeling down. They handcuffed me and placed me in the patrol car. Tom, shaking and pale, emerged from his car, and my eyes met Sarah's tear-streaked face as she spoke to the police. I managed a bitter smile before they drove me away. At the station, they processed me, and I made my one call to Luke. Being the weekend, I spent 2 nights in jail before my court appearance on Monday. I pleaded not guilty, and the judge set bail, which Luke promptly paid late that afternoon. "Anthony, they're talking about attempted homicide, or at least assault with a deadly weapon," he said. "I know," I muttered. "First things first, though. Take me to the bank. Sarah's probably drained the accounts, but I need to check." Sure enough, the cash was gone, although the CDs and bonds remained untouched, frozen by a court order. I called Sarah, who surprisingly answered. "You could have left me $5 at least." "You really are cheap," I said. I needed that money for the kids and me, she replied coldly. Doesn't Tom make enough? I've got mortgage payments to think about, too. Maybe I should just warm the house up with a little fire, I retorted sarcastically. Anthony, stop with the crazy talk. I'm sorry it turned out like this, but you're not helping yourself, she said, as though that would somehow make it easier. I'll accept it when you send my kids back home, I snapped. I can't, especially given your recent behavior. After all this is over, I'll let you see them, but you won't be seeing me and Tom. She ended the call with, from now on, talk to my attorney. Sarah, you have no idea how sorry you're going to be, I muttered to the dial tone. At my next court date, my attorney argued for temporary insanity, claiming I had acted impulsively after Sarah's shocking revelation. Sarah and Tom portrayed themselves as victims, both requesting restraining orders. The judge questioned me about my words to Tom, and I admitted I had warned him, though perhaps not verbatim. How would you feel if a friend betrayed you like that? I tried to explain, but my lawyer shot me a look that spoke volumes. Anthony, don't say a word, he whispered. We're trying to prove you didn't know what you were doing. Keep quiet. He was right. Mike, my boss, acted as my primary character witness, describing me as a dependable employee who never lost his temper. After his testimony, the case concluded, and we awaited the judge's decision. Back at work, Mike joked, offering to hire someone to make Tom and Sarah disappear. I declined, though the thought lingered. In the end, I was still trapped in the system. 6 months and $12,000 later, my divorce was finalized. Sarah received half of everything, including proceeds from the house sale. She claimed her jewelry was missing, accusing me of taking it. I countered that my belongings were also gone, suggesting she had taken them. Are they serious? I'm the one in jail, I yelled at my attorney after hearing the judge's sentence. Anthony, it could have been worse. You could have been facing manslaughter charges, he replied calmly. With good behavior, you'll be out in less than 8 months, and your record can be expunged in 2 years. Just do the time, get out, and move on. Easy for him to say, but the prospect of 24 hours a day incarcerated wasn't exactly something I was looking forward to. I appealed, but it was futile. My life had disintegrated within a year, all thanks to Sarah and Tom. Your job will be here when you get out, Mike assured me before I surrendered. Don't do anything stupid, and keep your head down. After one last visit with my children, I reported to the county facility. Luke kept my inmate account funded, though most of the commissary items were garbage. Without a phone or computer, I scribbled my thoughts on paper and made bi-weekly collect calls to Luke, my mother, and the kids to stay connected. During one visit, Luke said, I've got someone repairing your car with the insurance payout, and I'm taking care of your lawn. I also installed new deadbolt locks on the house. Sarah picked up the rest of her and the kids' clothes, but the furniture stayed. After I ensured she had a court order to remove anything else, I felt relieved that Luke was watching out for me. Sarah allowed my parents to see the children every other Sunday, but not without snide remarks about their jailbird father. She intended to impose strict rules for when I was released, but my parents tolerated it to maintain communication. After 7 months, I confirmed my visitation rights. Every other weekend, a full month in the summer, and shared holidays. I informed my boss that I'd need a week to readjust after my release. That day arrived sooner than anticipated, and I was ecstatic to trade the orange jumpsuit for street clothes. Luke was waiting outside, and we headed straight to the nearest bar. To freedom, I said, clinking bottles with him before downing the first of 3 beers. Beth's got a steak dinner with all the trimmings waiting for us, he said. You're staying with us for a few nights until you sort things out at the house. It's still up for sale, but no offers yet. Sarah wants to lower the price, but she needs your approval first. I smiled, feeling slightly more in control. All the furniture's still there, but I did get rid of the master bedroom set, like you asked, he added. Dinner was phenomenal. I consumed more in that one meal than I had in months, relishing the freedom to indulge. I drank too much, vaguely recalling 5 or 6 beers and 3 glasses of wine. When I finally awoke, it was after 10 o'clock a.m. the next day. By 11 o'clock a.m., I managed to stumble to the bathroom and make myself presentable. In the kitchen, I found a note from Luke. If you're reading this, you survived last night. There's coffee ready, and everything else is in the fridge. The spare bathroom has soap, a razor, shaving cream, a toothbrush, and toothpaste. If you need anything else, we'll get it tonight. The keys to my car and house were hanging on the rack by the back door. Don't do anything stupid, Luke's note read. See you around 5:30. I knew I could only stomach 2 cups of coffee and an English muffin. After a shower and a shave, I almost felt human again. Luke had left out clean clothes for me, and within the hour, I was driving to my house. Sitting in my repaired car outside, I lingered for a good 10 minutes, letting the memories wash over me. Taking a deep breath, I noticed the new deadbolt. With a turn of the key, I stepped inside. The place was trashed. Clothes were scattered everywhere. The kitchen was a disaster, and the refrigerator was still full of old food. In the corner by the sink, I saw the dent in the wall from the night my fist connected with a stud. Rubbing my knuckles, I remembered that moment vividly. Upstairs, the kids' closets were empty except for a few forgotten toys and treasures. My bedroom felt desolate, with only my dresser and a pile of clothes remaining. The dark patches on the carpet marked where her bed and dresser had been, a stark reminder that the room needed a complete renovation before I could bear to use it again. The entire house needed work before it could be put on the market, but I wasn't in any hurry to sell. I started a list of repairs, determined to have them done properly, though not necessarily by me. At the bank, I confirmed that she had cleaned out the lockbox. They had video proof, and my lawyer filed a motion to recover the contents. The court has ordered Sarah to return everything she took, my attorney explained. She's proposing to trade her share of the house for your share of the CDs and bonds. I instructed him to tell her to return everything or face arrest for non-compliance. She can be as angry as she likes. My job is to protect your interests. That's what I'm here for, he added. Back at the house, I inventoried what was left and contacted a local contractor to fix the walls. I also called Mary Maines to clean the kitchen and dining room, where I had thrown the microwave and dishes in a fit of rage. With the utilities still connected, I could move back in once I had a new bed. After some searching, I found a decent queen-size set for $900. At least I wouldn't be sleeping on a mattress my ex had shared with someone else. Hank, the contractor, arrived Saturday morning to give me an estimate. Your walls are solid, he chuckled, looking at the dent. Must have hurt when you punched that stud. Just fix the holes and put on a fresh coat of paint, I replied. Nothing fancy. How about $200? That's my price. Take it or leave it, he said. You did the neighborhood a favor with that thing with Tom's car, he added with a grin. Most of the guys around here look up to you now. I thanked him, and he got to work. Within 6 weeks, my CDs and bonds were back in the bank, the house was repaired and cleaned, and things felt almost normal. When the kids stayed with me for their first weekend, it was uncomfortable. I broke the silence. I know this feels weird, but this is still your home. Say whatever you need to. I've got thick skin now, and not much can shock me. Dad, we love you. We're sorry about what Mom did, Jack said, with Nora nodding in agreement. We didn't know about Tom until she said we'd be moving to his house. We weren't happy, and we still aren't. Look, I told them, there wasn't much I could do. Even without Tom, your mom and I wouldn't be getting back together. What we had is over. I'm still your dad, and I'll always love you. I'll be here for you. We hugged, ordered pizza, and watched a movie. I wanted to rant about their mother, but I held back. That first weekend felt like a victory. We ended up feeling like a family again, just a different one. I took Jack to get a proper haircut, and little by little, life moved forward. I returned to work, maintained a small social circle, and concentrated on the kids. Jack started playing soccer, and Nora was all about dance classes, which kept me busy. Everyone except my brother kept advising me to move on and start over. You're still young. You can find someone new, get married, and build a new life, they'd say. I'd just shake my head. Forget it. I wasted 14 years on her, and if I want to stay angry, that's my prerogative, I'd reply. None of them had been through what I had these past 2 years. Sometimes you need that pound of flesh to make the pain go away, one way or another. That's what I was going to get. Sarah wanted to reduce the asking price of the house, but I refused to budge. Anthony, it won't sell in this market unless we drop it by at least $20,000, she argued. If you're willing to give up $20,000 of your share, then fine. Otherwise, the price stays, I countered. We eventually divided the bonds and CDs. She spent hers on a new car and a vacation with Tom, while I deposited mine to build a nest egg. 8.5 months after getting out, I heard about the fire at Tom's house. While he and Sarah were at Jack's soccer game, someone had doused the electrical box at the back of the house with gasoline. The entire rear section was destroyed, and they lost power the following day. 2 officers showed up at my door, bringing me in for questioning. I kept my answers brief. I was at a neighborhood party with at least 10 people who saw me there, I stated. Anthony, you were only a block away. You could have done this, one officer accused. Prove it, I replied calmly. Finally, I stood up and told them, charge me, let me go, or I'm calling my lawyer. They released me, but warned they'd be watching. Mentally, I checked off my list. 1 down, 2 to go. Since Sarah and Tom's house was uninhabitable, I offered to take the kids while repairs were being made, which could take a couple of months. Sarah wasn't happy, but she didn't object. Anthony, I know you did it, regardless of what the police say, she accused one night as she picked up the kids. I don't know what you're talking about, I replied. I was with our friends. It was unfortunate that Tom and I were no longer welcome. Maybe I could put in a good word for you, I offered. Don't waste your time, she retorted bitterly. We wouldn't go even if they pleaded with us. Well, you have each other, and that's what counts right now, I said, offering a comforting smile. What's that supposed to mean? She questioned, her eyes flashing. Nothing, I responded, just that you're fortunate to have each other. This time, my smile was genuine. The kids seemed to prefer spending time with me, which didn't sit well with Sarah or Tom. I learned from them that they'd had some intense disagreements, with Tom insisting he wasn't their father. Sarah placed the blame on me, claiming I was instigating problems. I confronted her directly. Sarah, I don't speak ill of you. You're their mother, and I've encouraged them to respect you. As for Tom, he's a traitorous snake, lucky to be breathing, but other than that, he's an all right guy. She glared at me with murderous intent. He's kind to your children, so stop criticizing him, she demanded. Not a chance, I responded coldly. He means nothing to me, and I'll happily celebrate his demise someday. Her fury was palpable. Anthony, I swear, what are you going to do? Sarah challenged. Cheat on me? Divorce me? Imprison me? Make my life a living hell? Oh, wait, you've already done all that. You can't hurt me anymore. Now return to your husband and leave me be. Without another word, she stormed off. It was difficult to fathom that I had once adored her. Work progressed smoothly. Within a few weeks, I was back at full capacity, and Mike had assigned me 4 additional accounts. With the kids, and no one else at home, I had the availability. After establishing contact with my new clients, I scheduled 2-day trips to each location to familiarize myself with their processes. 3 accounts were straightforward, but K&G Enterprises presented a significant hurdle. They were restructuring their manufacturing operations, necessitating monthly visits to stay abreast of the changes. The designated engineer was competent, but condescending and uncooperative, making it difficult to obtain the necessary information. Mike, if they don't provide me with what I need, their entire system is going to crash, I cautioned. Mike brought in a liaison, Amber Stevenson, to work directly with me. Pleased to meet you. I'm Anthony, I said, as she introduced herself with a firm handshake. Amber held a degree in process engineering and had been employed at K&G Enterprises for 5 years. We collaborated effectively, and she consistently provided me with the necessary data. 2 weeks before concluding the initial phase, I proposed dinner. Amber, I'd like to treat you and your husband to dinner as a token of my appreciation. The Westin, where I'm lodging, has an excellent restaurant. How about 6 o'clock? She accepted, and we sealed the agreement with a handshake. I departed the plant by 4:30, addressed outstanding emails, and arrived at the restaurant early. I was taken aback when Amber arrived unaccompanied. "Where's your husband?" I inquired. "I'm not married," she chuckled. "Why do you ask?" "Oh, I apologize. I just presumed," I responded, noticing the rings on her finger. She smiled. "I wear them to maintain a professional demeanor. People are less likely to make advances toward a married woman, and I circumvent awkward situations. Furthermore, married individuals are often perceived as more stable and are promoted more readily." "How do you explain it at company functions?" I asked. "I simply say he's out of town," she replied with a shrug. "They don't inquire further." We shared a laugh, and by the end of dinner, I had recounted some of the events of the past 2 years. "That's terrible," she said, shaking her head. "What you endured was horrific." "Tell me about it," I agreed. "But I'm moving forward." Revenge was still a motivating factor, but I also desired to rebuild my life. "You're young, Anthony, and there are plenty of women who would be thrilled to be with someone like you," she said, offering an encouraging smile. "Perhaps," I responded, "but I haven't been particularly motivated to date. Trusting anyone is still challenging." "Well, you did ask me out," she teased. "You and your husband," I corrected. "Would you have asked me if I weren't married?" she inquired, her eyes sparkling. "Probably," I admitted honestly. "You're easy to converse with, not like my ex." "Thanks, I think," she laughed. Dinner was enjoyable, and I departed the following day, not anticipating a return for a month. I requested Amber to contact me if anything arose, and we maintained contact via phone and email. Soon, we were seeing each other most evenings when I was in town, which was every few weeks. Trust remained an obstacle, but I was striving to overcome it. After a couple of months, our relationship progressed. I was finally prepared to allow someone back into my life. "Maybe I'm starting to feel normal again," I mused one evening. Amber mentioned a conflict on Wednesday, which didn't register as significant. Being in town, I searched for a new restaurant to explore, having already frequented most local establishments. I located a pleasant Korean restaurant approximately 25 minutes away. I ordered a beer and a sampler platter, anticipating a relaxing evening. Then I heard her distinctive laughter. There was Amber, seated with another man, holding hands. It was clearly not a casual encounter. My appetite vanished. I finished my beer, paid, and left. On Thursday, I avoided her, opting for a solitary lunch. By 3 p.m., Amber was back, behaving flirtatiously. "So, you took care of your conflict last night?" I inquired. "Yep, and tonight, I'm all yours," she responded with a smile. I looked her directly in the eye. I discovered a charming little Korean place with a sampler platter. "Ring a bell?" Her face paled. "Anthony, I can explain." "No need," I interrupted. "I've already discarded one dishonest woman. I don't require another." I turned and left, cutting my trip short. After a week of ignoring her emails, she ceased her attempts. Fortunately, Mike assigned me a new contact, a male this time. My trust issues resurfaced with full force, exacerbated by Amber's deception. Then, 3 months later, I received. The social exile Tom and I shared was irritating. "Perhaps I could smooth things over for you?" I suggested. "A futile gesture," she snapped, bitterness lacing her tone. "We wouldn't attend even if they implored us." "At least you have one another, and that's the most important thing for now," I offered, along with a reassuring smile. "What's that implication?" she demanded, eyes blazing. "Nothing at all," I replied. "Simply that you're both lucky to have found solace in each other's company." This time my smile was sincere. The children seemed increasingly drawn to me, a development that neither Sarah nor Tom appreciated. I gathered from the kids that they'd had some heated exchanges, with Tom vehemently denying any paternal role. Sarah predictably blamed me, accusing me of sowing discord. I addressed her frankly. Sarah, I haven't uttered a negative word about you. You are their mother, and I've consistently advised them to heed your guidance. Regarding Tom, he's a two-faced scoundrel, fortunate to be drawing breath, but setting that aside, he's a decent enough fellow. Her glare could have curdled milk. He treats your children well, so cease your disparaging remarks, she insisted. Absolutely not, I retorted icily. He's insignificant to me, and I won't shed a tear when he meets his maker. Her rage was a tangible force. Anthony, so help me, what's your game? Sarah challenged. Infidelity? Divorce? Incarceration? Transforming my existence into a torment? Oh, right. You've already ticked all those boxes. You're powerless to inflict further pain. Now go back to your husband and leave me in peace. Without further utterance, she turned on her heel and marched away. It was baffling to reflect on how deeply I had once loved her. My professional life was progressing without a hitch. Within weeks, I was operating at peak efficiency, and Mike delegated 4 more accounts to my portfolio. With the children at home and no other distractions, I had the requisite time. After initiating contact with the new clients, I arranged 2-day site visits to each location to gain a comprehensive understanding of their operations. 3 of the accounts proved uncomplicated, but K&G Enterprises presented a considerable challenge. They were in the midst of a major overhaul of their manufacturing processes, necessitating monthly visits to remain current with their developments. The assigned engineer, while possessing technical expertise, was arrogant, dismissive, and obstructive, hindering my ability to gather the essential data. Mike, if they don't furnish me with the information I require, their entire system will implode, I warned. Mike intervened by appointing a liaison, Amber Stevenson, to work in conjunction with me. A pleasure to make your acquaintance. I'm Anthony, I stated, as she introduced herself with a resolute handshake. Amber possessed a degree in process engineering and boasted 5 years of experience at K&G Enterprises. Our professional rapport was excellent, and she unfailingly procured the necessary information. 2 weeks prior to the completion of the first phase, I suggested a celebratory dinner. Amber, I began, I'd like to extend an invitation to you and your husband for dinner, as a gesture of gratitude. The Westin, where I'm currently staying, has a superb restaurant. Shall we say 6 o'clock? She readily agreed, and we confirmed the arrangement with a handshake. I left the plant at 4:30, attended to pending emails, and arrived at the restaurant ahead of schedule. I was somewhat surprised to see Amber arrive alone. Where's your husband? I inquired. I'm not married, she responded with a light laugh. Why the question? My apologies, I said, noticing the rings adorning her finger. I simply assumed. She smiled. I wear them for professional reasons. It discourages unwanted attention and prevents potentially awkward encounters. Plus, there's a perception that married individuals are more stable, which can be advantageous for career advancement. So how do you handle inquiries about your husband at company events? I asked. I just tell them he's out of town, she replied with a shrug. Nobody presses the issue. We shared a chuckle, and over the course of dinner, I divulged some details about the trials and tribulations of the past 2 years. That's dreadful, she said, shaking her head. You've been through an ordeal. You can say that again, I concurred. But I'm determined to move on. Thoughts of retribution still lingered, but I was also focused on rebuilding my life. You're a young man, Anthony, she encouraged, her smile radiating warmth. There are countless women who would be delighted to be in your company. Maybe so, I replied, but I haven't felt much inclination towards dating. Trust is a difficult commodity these days. Well, you did ask me out, she teased playfully. You and your hypothetical husband, I corrected. Would you have extended the invitation if I hadn't been wearing these rings? She inquired, a mischievous glint in her eyes. Probably, I confessed honestly. You're easy to talk to, unlike my ex. Thanks, I think. She laughed. Dinner was a pleasant affair, and I departed the following day, not expecting to return for a month. I asked Amber to keep me informed of any pertinent developments, and we stayed in touch through phone calls and emails. Soon, we were spending most evenings together whenever I was in town, which was every 2 or 3 weeks. My trust issues remained a persistent hurdle, but I was actively working to overcome them. After a couple of months, our relationship deepened. I was finally ready to let someone into my life again. Perhaps I'm finally starting to feel normal, I reflected one evening. Amber mentioned a prior engagement on Wednesday, a detail that didn't strike me as particularly noteworthy. Since I was in town, I decided to try a new restaurant, having already sampled most of the local establishments. I found a promising Korean restaurant about 25 minutes away. I settled in, ordered a beer and a sampler platter, and looked forward to a relaxing evening. That's when I heard her unmistakable laughter. There she was, Amber, seated with another man, their hands intertwined. This was clearly more than a casual acquaintance. My appetite instantly evaporated. I finished my beer, paid the bill, and exited the restaurant. The next day I steered clear of her, having lunch alone. By 3:00 p.m., Amber reappeared, radiating her usual flirtatious charm. "So, did you take care of your conflict last night?" I asked pointedly. "Sure did," she replied with a smile. "And tonight, I'm all yours." I met her gaze unflinchingly. I found a cozy Korean place with an interesting sampler platter. Sound familiar? The color drained from her face. "Anthony, I can explain." "No explanation necessary," I cut her off. "I've already dealt with one deceitful woman. I don't need another." I turned and walked away, abbreviating my trip. After a week of unanswered emails, she finally gave up. Thankfully, Mike reassigned me to a new contact, a man this time. My trust issues returned with a vengeance, amplified by Amber's betrayal. Then, 3 months later, I received, "Someone watch him," he pointed at me. "Unless you have a recording of Mr. McVeigh making a threat, you have no case." "Mr. McVeigh, why don't you move on? She left you. It happens," the officer said, irritation evident in his voice. "If she snaps and hurts someone, we'll hold you responsible," another officer warned. I turned to my lawyer. "Is there a way to end this?" "My client wants his kids back," my lawyer stated. "If Mrs. Kelly relinquishes custody, he'll back off." "That's for the court to decide," the officer replied, before finally releasing me. That Sunday morning, while enjoying coffee and the newspaper, the doorbell rang. It was Sarah's parents, dressed for church. "Can I offer you some coffee?" I asked, but they declined. "Anthony, we understand our daughter's actions were wrong, especially with you being incarcerated," her father began. "But she's our only child, and we're concerned for her well-being. I'm not seeking to harm her," I replied, maintaining an even tone. "She made her choices, and now she faces the consequences. I simply want my children. They're better off with me, particularly with her life seemingly unraveling. I'd hate for them to suffer if something were to happen to her." They exchanged uneasy glances. "We'll speak with her, but you know how headstrong she can be," her mother replied, attempting to diffuse the tension. "That's where you're mistaken. The woman I married would never have been unfaithful or betrayed me. I don't recognize the person she is now, other than the mother of my children. I want her to experience a wretched existence. I don't forgive, and I don't forget," I stated flatly. They departed quickly, and I was confident they'd received the message. Thursday evening around 7 p.m., she finally appeared. She must have walked, as I hadn't heard a car. I peered through the peephole and opened the door. "Come in, Sarah. Care for a drink?" "Hemlock on the rocks," I quipped, closing the door. "Very funny. You really are a jerk, you know," she retorted. I opened the door again, gesturing outside. "I think we're finished here. So good of you to drop by. I hope you have a short, miserable life," I said. "I'm not leaving until we've talked," she insisted, settling onto the living room sofa. "Suit yourself," I replied, pouring myself a glass of wine. "So, to what do I owe the pleasure?" "I still own half of this house," she declared. "Less what I've paid since the divorce," I reminded her. "I want it sold. What will it take for you to lower the asking price?" she asked, exasperation evident in her voice. "An act of God, or you could cover the loss with interest," I replied coolly. I just want you out of this neighborhood, out of my life, she snapped. That's never going to happen, I stated firmly. Do you hate me that much? She asked, her tone softening. More than you can possibly comprehend, I answered. It wasn't supposed to happen this way, she began, clearly uncomfortable. I never intended to become involved with Tom. It just happened. Things don't just happen, Sarah. You made a conscious choice, I retorted. He needed me, she said defensively. I fell in love with him because we needed each other. And what were you doing? Charity work? I asked, my voice sharp. I needed you. Our children needed you. Our marriage needed you. You chose him over us. Now he's dead, and suddenly, he's not so needy anymore, I said, a smile playing on my lips at the memory. I only wish I'd been driving the car that night. You've become so hateful, Anthony. Taking pleasure in someone's misfortune is twisted, she said, disgusted. I may be twisted, but you and Tom drove me to it. 60% of marriages fail, but not all spouses end up despising each other, I pointed out. Don't you care about anyone else's marriage? She asked, her eyes narrowing. Not in the slightest, I replied. And by the way, how long have I been playing the fool? She hesitated, then finally answered. 5 months. I almost told you after the first time. I was devastated, but you didn't notice. And it continued. How many times did you sleep with him in our bed? Never, she said angrily. I wouldn't do that. So, anywhere else was fine, I retorted. Our friends saw you and didn't even tell me. I can't trust anyone now. Where do we go from here? She asked. This house is our last connection. What about the children? I'm not giving them up, she replied defiantly. You drove me to lose custody. If I hadn't pursued Tom's car, things might be different. Now it's just you and me, I said, her eyes widening in shock. Are you threatening me? Me? Deprive my children of their mother? I scoffed. Never. But if something were to happen, well, I'd ensure they always remembered you. She stood up, visibly shaken. I'm leaving. We had 12 good years, and I'm sorry it ended this way. She leaned in to kiss my cheek, but I recoiled. Don't touch me, you disgust me, I said coldly. I'm sorry, she stammered. Don't be. I'm not, I replied, watching her walk away. As she reached the driveway, I called out, You know, Tom had that same look right before he died. Too bad I didn't take a picture. She fled back to her house. In truth, I had started the fire at Tom's house. 2 Gatorade bottles filled with gasoline and a lit cigarette had been all it took. I'd made certain everyone was out before slipping away. As for his death, that was just his bad luck. Still, Sarah and her family would always suspect my involvement, and that was fine with me. Now, Sarah was likely at home, locking her doors, convinced she was next. But I had no intention of harming her. I'd simply continue planting seeds of doubt and let her paranoia fester. Maybe someday the children would choose to live with me. The only genuinely positive outcome from this entire ordeal was meeting someone new. Her name is Amanda, and she works for the State Department of Corrections. She was assigned to check on me after my release, ensuring I was adjusting. Amanda is tough and no nonsense, qualities I respect. Once the formalities were concluded, we began conversing and discovered a surprising number of shared interests. After my probation ended, we went on a proper date. I confessed my struggles with trust, and she admitted that most people are dishonest with her in one way or another. We're both actively working on our trust issues together, gradually getting to know each other. Amanda has helped me realize how my bitterness was preventing me from experiencing genuine life and forming meaningful connections. If you mess up and land yourself back in jail, she warned me with a smile that sent shivers down my spine, I'll make sure it's my cell block where you end up. And you know what? I believe her. She's someone I wouldn't dare cross, and it's oddly comforting knowing she'd never betray me either. For the first time in years, I believe I'm finally ready to move on and embrace something real.